So far, the Mets have had one of the craziest off seasons in history, and it's in a good way. Isn't it great how we can say that now? From minor league deals, frontline additions, supporting signings, value trades, and waiver claims, the Mets have really worked hard to improve their 40-man roster. They've replaced multiple longtime pieces, added quality and quantity to the depth chart, and removed some black holes on the roster. But there's still some work to do. With the, as I'm recording this, the pending addition of Carlos Correa, there could be some pieces on the 40-man roster that could be expendable, that could get you pieces in return to improve the flexibility in weaker areas of the roster. Some of these pieces could be traded, some of them could be outright cut, and some may be just replaced with other internal options. All three of those possibilities sprout this video. So here are 6 current Mets who might not return in 2023. Now, every player mentioned in this video are currently on the Mets 40-man roster, and they all have their specific reasons as to why they may not return for the 2023 Mets season. So let's start this off with Jeff McNeil. Oh man, that joke will never get old. Let's actually begin with Carlos Carrasco. For those of you who missed our video about 5 teams that could deal for Carlos Carrasco, there are multiple valid reasons as to why they would. Number one being the actual report that they are shopping him on the trade market. But for those of you who are confused as to why they would trade Carlos Carrasco, let's just point out the facts first. Earlier this offseason, the Mets exercised Carlos Carrasco's $14 million vesting option by reaching the team option requirements. Carrasco is also now 36 years old and coming off 2 different major surgeries during his Mets tenure. This has expressed the concern that he may be starting to slow down as he enters the rough side of 30. Now, if they are concerned, why would they bring him back? Well, the Mets definitely were in need of insurance with Jacob deGrom, Chris Bassett, Taijuan Walker, and Trevor Williams all going to free agency. But with the Mets refilling their rotation ever since, the expendability is higher and also needed. With the Mets establishing their top 2 of a 38-year-old Max Scherzer and a 40-year-old Justin Verlander, the injury concerns are huge. Now, although the Mets also added a durable starter in Jose Quintana, the question mark of Kodai Senga that emerges, the reliability of depth options like David Peterson, Tyler McGill, and Joey Lucchesi are also an additional risk. The point is, the Mets really need to aim younger with the back end of this rotation to ensure a quality backup for the inevitable injuries at the top of this rotation. And backing up an older, more injury-prone pitchers such as Verlander or Scherzer with an older, injury-prone pitcher in Carrasco creates the same problem in a 162-game season. Carrasco is also not a long-term piece to this team. With him now entering a contract year, it does make sense to move him for more younger assets, with the known fact that he won't be here in 2024, and so on. Even though the Mets' top ask for Carrasco is a controllable MLB starter, any return could benefit the Mets. If they were to move him to dump his salary, it opens up the space to maybe bring in multiple young arms on the free agent market. They could move him for a younger and more controllable piece to replace him. They could also move him for a prospect or two that they could stash in the minors that might be a piece down the line you can use at the trade deadline. And Carrasco can definitely be intriguing to many teams with young pitching staffs that can flip him at the deadline to strengthen their farm system. Now, even though he does have the health concerns, in the past he's been able to pitch a lot. But it's really tough to see him benefiting an older rotation such as the New York Mets. An older team's concern could be another younger team's improvement. And that brings us to Drew Smith. If you watched the 4 of us before, you know that we've pretty much closed the book on Drew Smith. Although Drew wasn't necessarily bad when healthy, he's performed below expectation over the past few years. No one expected him to be a top-tier reliever, but we have expected him to be a reliable high-leverage reliever. With Smith having great strikeout stuff with high 90s velocity and a quality pair of sharp breaking pitches, the problem is that his command is awful. His control is good, but when you regularly miss spots like he does, you'll get hit harder than ever. If you were to watch every piece of hard contact that he has given up, Drew always misses the intended spot, and he misses badly. Now, of course, you can never have enough pitching, and the need for Drew to be a high-leverage reliever piece most likely won't exist anymore with the Mets' current big four of Adam Ottavino, Brooks Raley, David Robertson, and Edwin Diaz. But I think it's safe to say that the Mets have about 12 to 15 arms that could replace Drew Smith if they outpitch him in Port St. Lucie this spring. We've been waiting for Drew Smith to be a reliable piece for multiple years now, and he's continued to struggle with the exact same problems he's had since day one. When the offseason began, I expressed my urge to blow up this entire bullpen and build a new pen around Edwin Diaz. One of those pieces that needed to go was Drew Smith. And as far as I'm concerned, spring training is his last chance to prove himself. With a lot more older pieces in the back end of this bullpen than you'd like, if the Mets need Drew Smith to move to a high leverage spot in the bullpen, they're in big trouble from what we have seen so far in his career. Now let's get to Eduardo Escobar. Is it possible that Eduardo Escobar could stay? Yes, but the Mets' current situation makes a lot of sense as to why he would be moved. First, there's the obvious pending addition of Carlos Correa, who would play third base, which is Escobar's primary position. His secondary position being second base, which is currently locked down by Jeff McNeil. Now, Escobar has played the outfield before, but hasn't played it in a while, and it's really hard to believe that he'll be trusted to do so at age 34. You also could move him to the bench, but the lack of flexibility would still be a problem with other infield options such as Brett Beatty, Luis Guillorme, and Mark Vientos on this roster. The point is, while Escobar is making $10 million this year, his role on this team is going to be limited in every aspect no matter what. And with this current bench pool that includes 3 infielders, 3 DHs, and 3 catchers, it makes perfect sense to move limited pieces for flexibility such as Eduardo Escobar. It's a very similar situation to Carlos Carrasco. This is an expiring contract that you have very little intention of keeping long term, that you should be willing to explore trades to get assets back for him instead of letting him leave in free agency. The Mets just have too many of a kind that have limited strengths. And that lack of flexibility also applies to Mark Vientos, who seems to just be the carbon copy of the JD Davis situation. I mean, think about it. It's a balanced power bat who strikes out a lot, and he's a limited defender who can't really play any position well. Sure, he could play third base, but again, with the pending Carlos Correa, along with 3 other third base options that play the position better than him, he's blocked. He's also played a little bit of first base, but I think we have one of those already that's in the lineup 99% of the time. The man never gets injured, and I don't think he really needs a backup. Main reason why a lot of Mets fans don't understand why they kept Dom Smith for so long. Although he could be a DH, the Mets have reportedly been in pursuit of another bat post the Correa move. Whether it is a 4th outfielder, another DH, or a utility player, their value could easily push Vientos down the depth chart. The truth is that Vientos has great power upside, and he deserves to play every day. But there just isn't a spot for him right now on a World Series contending roster. He's not better than Alvarez, he's not better than Beatty, and in some cases, he's not even better than Ronnie Mauricio. Not to mention Vientos used to be a top 100 prospect, but his value has decreased ever since, and it also has the risk of declining even more staying on this roster and having limited playing time. The easy truth is that prospects need MLB reps and consistent MLB reps to develop into reaching those expectations, and it's hard to believe that he's going to get that with the Mets. And then we talk about lack of flexibility even more, bringing us to Daniel Vogelbach. Earlier this offseason, the Mets picked up Vogelbach's $1.5 million team option, but once again, in terms of flexibility, he provides the least out of anyone on this list. He doesn't play a position, he can't really hit left-handed pitching, and he isn't the feared power protection that this lineup lacks without him. If you look at what the Mets gave up in return for Daniel Vogelbach near the trade deadline, that was a controllable reliever in Colin Holderman. And that could benefit the Mets' 40-man roster depth even more because you can never have enough pitching, and $1.5 million is not that hard to move on on the trade market. And you also have the fact that he is a good hitter overall. The problem is he provides the most as a platoon DH. But in the Mets' sake of also wanting another bat post the Correa move, you'd think that they would want to add someone who can hit left-handed pitching and right-handed pitching and also play a position. Whether it's a free agent like Trey Mancini, maybe bringing in a veteran like Evan Longoria, or going full versatility like Jerickson Profar, or maybe a rumored trade candidate like Eloy Jimenez or Tyler O'Neill. Now, off the top of my head, I don't think that Daniel Vogelbach does get moved because the Mets like him a lot, but it does make sense if you want to add a lot more flexibility to this roster and not cater to a limited window of value. It's definitely something that they should explore, but I think he's the least likely out of everyone on this list. And finally, that brings us to Darren Ruff. This is the easiest of reasoning. Darren Ruff sucks. I didn't understand this trade when it happened, and I still don't. The Mets needed a lefty-killing DH last offseason, and they proceeded to trade 4 assets for a 36-year-old Darren Ruff. And he was awful. With younger options here to possibly take his role, I'd expect the Mets to DFA him. Ruff is not only a limited player with the lack of flexibility like most players on this list, but he's also older. The odds of him getting any better are slim to none. The Mets will most likely cut their losses here because it wasn't a good trade from the beginning, and it still looks even more stupid now. At the time, the Mets did need to move on from JD Davis and improve the power protection around Alonso, but the addition of Darren Ruff just made it worse. There's been rumors that Ruff is being shopped, so it is good to see that the Mets are trying to fix the flexibility issue overall, but I don't really expect any team to want him. Even though another additional bat most likely pushes out Darren Ruff either way, I will say this: if Darren Ruff is on the Mets 2023 opening day roster, you have a massive problem. It's going to be very interesting to see how they approach the rest of this offseason and with the trade market, because a lot of these guys intertwine with each other. In the situation where, let's say, Daniel Vogelbach gets dealt, what does that mean for Vientos? What does that mean for Darren Ruff? There's a lot of possible combinations that you could see on opening day, and I'm interested to see how they do so. Even though the roster is stacked, there's still ways they can make it even better and put themselves over the top with a deep and more flexible team. And it's up to Billy Epler to choose which one that should be to put the Mets in the best position to win.